Hello, everyone. We're here today with Maria Price and Barbara Carter from St. John Center. We'll start off with them just introducing themselves and telling us about their roles at St. John Center.
All right, I'm Maria Price, and I'm the Executive Director of St. John Center. I've been the director for 5 years. I was hired 7 years ago, so I worked 2 years in development, and then was hired as the Executive Director in 2008. So I've been serving in this function since then.
And I'm Barbara Carter. I am actually the Director of Field Education at Spalding University, which is where you folks are. I got involved at St. John Center when I had a student who was interested in doing her practicum here. So I contacted Maria to see if it was possible to have a social work student at the center. She was open to it. We got everything in place for that. I then agreed to provide the supervision for the student because there wasn't a social worker on staff who could provide the supervision. And that's how I got involved officially with St. John. First as a volunteer, then as a board member, then a committee chair, and eventually I was the secretary, the vice chair, and then the president.
So back in
6 years ago. Yeah.
07.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, the center was going through some rocky times. The economy had kind of crashed, and the center was looking at, do we plan to close our doors or plan to stay open, and how are we going to do that? And that was the beginning of a strategic plan, because I don't think there was a strategic plan at that point.
So some about when I think of working with a board, it's really critical that our board be informed, that they have the information they need to be able to make good decisions, and that their responsibility is to make sure we have the resources to meet our mission, and those resources take all kinds of shape. So do we have the right staff in place to perform the very best job that we can? Do we have the financial resources to be stable enough to behave strategically, not always in a reactionary way? Are we focused on the right activities in our daily work, our programmatic work, to meet mission? Is our mission still on target? So the work of the board back in 07-08 looked very different because we were in crisis mode. And they were really figuring out what is it going to take for us to get to really marshal the resources to be the best at what we can be and do the best at what we want to do, serving homeless men, providing self-sufficiency services, and permanent supportive housing, so that at least one person at a time we are ending homelessness. So being able to make sure that we've got all the resources that we need to meet our mission, when I first came on staff, that meant really assembling a team of folks to look at the program work. What were we doing, and how did we prove that it made a difference? What were our measurable outcomes? Is this enough? Can we do more? Should we do more? Can we do better? How can we do better? And it was really a great function of the board and assembling other supportive folks from social services community to help do that analysis. And that was a significant part of a strategic plan that was launched. And then it was also really paying more attention to doing grassroots fundraising, shoring up grant funding, and other, trying to get the financial ship back on track as well.
And I think from a board perspective, I call this a worker bee board, that really getting together the right combination of people, from social services to bankers to accountants and to have the right configuration on the board that then is able to actually do the work, not just rubber stamp the work of what's going on at the center. I see the board as a support to you even in terms of personnel. If a personnel issue comes up, not that the board comes in and micromanages that, but how can we as a board support you to do the work you need to do to run this place? But the board is very engaged here, and I think this board, I'm on a couple of other boards too. Some boards you just listen and shake your head and stamp yes, let's move. Not this board. I think the board at St. John really works well together. People roll up their sleeves. They're in there, from volunteering out on the front desk to the shower room to, picking up stuff for guys in housing to strategic planning and the developing investment strategies. All of those things involved the board. And I think having board training, we had some folks come in and actually help train the board. What is the function of the board? How do we work more effectively as a board? I think that was helpful too.
Maria, as an executive director, what do you expect from your board?
We have some basic roles and responsibilities of board members. The board only meets as a full board 6 times a year. So it's an expectation that people are able to prioritize this agency enough to be at each board meeting. And then each board member is expected to either volunteer here at the shelter on a regular basis or be part of one of our committees. The committees meet on the month's opposite board meetings. So there's some kind of either committee or full board once a month. So those are some very basic. We have 100% participation of board members making a financial contribution, and there's no set standard to that. We just ask each board member to make their own decision about that. And one of the primary roles of a board member is to be a true believer in the agency and what we do. So they are supposed to be our best advocates, our best, most emphatic cheerleaders in the community, because they can reach this broad sector of the community. It's a way for the agency to have legs and to be out in the community. So that's an expectation as well, that they will invite friends to hear about, see about, take a tour, come to our fundraising events, whatever it might be, that we're constantly building our base of support. They're asked to be informed. And I send an email with just updates on a regular basis. And they get full financials and they get an executive summary. And sometimes when all the news is good, it might be easy for a board to rubber stamp the conversation or the decisions. We have not quite been in that situation for a while, but we've been a working board that's had a lot to do. So participating in those committees also helps you be fully informed. But the board has a responsibility to the finances of the agency and making sure that we're being good stewards of every single dollar, whether it is a government grant, a private foundation, or an individual's $10 donation. So that is also about being informed, reading the financials, asking questions, making sure we're being wise in our financial decision making.
And again, the support. I think just if there's something that happens, you can share that with the board, and the board is supportive and gives ideas and suggestions to not say this is how you have to do this, but we're there behind you, and here's some ideas, maybe based on our the different board members' experience. Because you bring your experience, everybody kind of brings their experience to the table, and try to plan from there. Because it's hard being the executive director and running the ship and without having the support.
And you include consumers on your board, right?
Yes,
We do. Mm-hmm.
Why? What do they add to the board?
Rich. They add richness. I think it. Often, or what I found that, when you have accountants and lawyers and social workers, and sometimes we forget, what is the real work? What does this guy really need? So he brings that voice to the table of what the reality is, not just sitting at a meeting. ask good questions, holds the board accountable for the decisions that it makes. I think it adds a richness to the board.
And Barb, as a board member of a nonprofit, what do you expect from the executive director?
I expect honesty. I expect if there is something, let's try to figure it out before it becomes a major problem, and just to be open to support, and not too micro, because I think sometimes there can be a fine line between managing and supporting. So I think being open to that support before, especially in problematic times, that is what I expect.
Maria, what's a typical day like for you? Or a typical week?
A typical week. Lots of communication with staff, lots of updates about where different projects are, initiatives, problems, status on any number of things. And just yesterday, for example, giving input about a little brochure that we're going to do, beginning to put together comments for a couple public speaking engagements that are coming up. Lots of problem solving regarding systems changes that are coming from HUD or Metro grant sources, and so these expectations are going to mean some changes in just a few infrastructure issues that we have or systems that we have in place. So lots of problem solving along that line, and then a couple meetings and a tour of folks. That's probably about a typical day. And then trying to get through the mail and trying to get through email. That's a daily challenge.
I think a board function also, especially here, is, Maria's in the weeds every day with the work to run the shelter, and the board really isn't. So I think giving a broader perspective sometimes, because we're not here every day dealing with the day-to-day issues, and I think that can be helpful too in terms of strategic planning. It's like, hey, we need to hire somebody else. Do we have the money? How can we, to help Maria so she can be out there in the community doing more engagement instead of the day-to-day. And so I think the board helps kind of shape some of the operational components here that you don't have to worry about. It's like, hey, we see the work you're doing. We know we need to hire a grant writer. Let's see if we can do that. And I think that comes from the partnership between the board and you as the executive director and staff.
And one of the things that we've instituted that has helped me immensely is a monthly meeting with the board co-chairs, so that it forces me to keep a running list of, I need to talk with Barb and Joe about this, and this, and I'll keep that list running. And it forces me to pull my head out of the weeds and keep them fully updated. And those are going to be more intensive conversations than what goes out on an email update. So it's a helpful discipline, because it's easy to let go of that and think, I'll tell them later, or I'll get around to that later. There's never a good time for later. And just keeping that discipline has been really important. And it's a great way for me to gain perspective, because you do start to lose sight. Yeah.
Maria, what are your biggest challenges as an executive director of a nonprofit?
I guess the daily challenge is trying to balance the immediate demands, or putting out fires and answering lots of immediate questions, with being strategic and smart and forward thinking, and constantly bringing in new information and challenging assumptions and challenging what we do, and creating a learning and supportive environment for staff. So that's the tension, I guess, that I feel every day, meeting immediate needs, but also trying to think more proactively and strategically.
What, your video is being watched by students in my class who are either currently nonprofit leaders or hope to be nonprofit leaders in the future. What advice would you have for them?
stay in Louisville. We need good and smart. If you're from other parts of Kentucky or the region, move to Louisville. We need lots of good and smart leadership to stay in Louisville. And I guess I would say it's incredibly rewarding. It's challenging in that I feel like it's a deep personal investment. Every shred of me is challenged on a regular basis. I'm challenged to be creative, to be thoughtful, to be strategic, to be a good problem solver, to be resourceful, to have thick skin, to deal with it and move on, to have a broad array of skills from managing finances to understanding program outcomes and being able to motivate and compel our staff members to be their best every day. So it's a broad array of skills for, at least for a small nonprofit leader, because we don't have the luxury of being really compartmentalized or the detriment, because there's certainly a lot of beauty in getting to have a broad work plan and a broad set of challenges every day.
And I would say, as a board person, to not be afraid to do something outside of your comfort zone. Homeless Men was not anything that was in my career path. I always worked in child services, and so to be able to step outside your comfort zone, volunteer somewhere. See, you never know what jazzes you up. Just on the tour, the first tour of St. John's Center, it's like, wow, I can't believe the work. This is a hidden gem, and so to take a risk, volunteer, start small. You don't have to, actually become an officer on a board, but get involved in your community on something that you might have passion about.
There are many of small boards out there that are always looking to find board members and having trouble doing so.
Absolutely, yeah. And the Center for Nonprofit Excellence is a great resource to connect interested potential board members with agencies looking for boards, if there's not already a clear and natural fit for folks. So.
Well, thank you all. Anything else you want to add?
That's all.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Good
Thanks
luck.
for your time.
Thank you.